G'day, Stu from UAV Futures here, and today, well, what we're going to be checking out is this little bad boy. This is the 4-inch Vlyfly X150, big mouthful, a tiny little drone, but essentially it's got some very strange designs in here. So what this is, we're going to be seeing it on the bench. This is the part 1 review, the bench breakdown. We look at the text and the specs and why this is a bit of an interesting choice. And in the part 2 video, a little card should flash right up here somewhere with the magic of editing. You can go watch that, and that's where we take it out to the field, fly it around, hit this thing with the speed gun, see what Crumpy Trev, Crash Descal, see what they think about this little bad boy as well. Now this is pretty special for you guys out there if you're looking for a quad that can be under that 250 gram limit, because look, that's the sort of market that this is going after, because it's super light and with a small battery and the small motors that are on here, because that's what this thing is after. It's super light and it's a really nice, smooth, I guess, first time flyer. Anyway, enough rambling here, let's stick it on the bench and get started with the review. Oh, one other thing too, drop your comments down below, make sure you like, subscribe, all that sort of stuff, because we're giving one of these bad boys away. So shout out to Vlyfly for providing, and I guess ask them, you know, they wanted to give another one away to you guys. So put your comments down below, what do you like about this drone, and then check your inbox, spam box or something like that, check the official rules, but one of you subscribers is also going to be winning one of these bad boys. Alright, let's get on with the review. Alrighty, so here it is on the bench, and first things first, I've got to apologise to Vlyfly. Usually I put them on the bench and talk at her, but I took this thing out and flew it around straight away. I was having an absolute blast, and look, we do have the original props on here. They lasted quite a while, but we've got a little broken one there. So when you get it, of course, this prop doesn't come as chipped up as this, but what we have, this is the model right here. It's Bite and Fly, it's a 4-inch drone, and I think it's aimed at beginners, so you can take it out of the box. It's got some really neat little features that make it very useful to tell you exactly what's going on with the programming side of things and the channels and all that sort of stuff, and it is a very, very smooth flight experience with a fantastic FPV camera. Now the first thing we really need to do, I guess, if we're looking at it, let's stick it on the scales, find out how much it's going to weigh, and we should we'll throw the little antenna that it comes on with as well. I better tear my scales. Oh, great. There we go. Let's tear my scales. It's coming in at about 177 grams. So look, I think if you put the right battery on here, you would be well below that 250 gram limit. I guess if you're in the States, you won't need that FAA registration if you care about that sort of stuff. Now, one other thing before we look at the components, you're going to see, look, I'm going to flash some pictures on the screen. It is a very different sort of stack design. So they've sort of used some of their internal plates, the internal boards, as part of the structure to separate the drone and the base plate and the arms and that sort of stuff. And that doesn't usually happen. So look, I've got some concerns about that. We'll talk about that a little bit more when it comes to the components. But overall, it's a Bite and Fly racer, and it is a lot of fun to fly. So let's jump in, have a look at the components. We're going to start at the outside in. I'm going to take the props off, so let's get these out of the way. Alrighty, so with the props off, we'll talk about the motors in a minute, but the props that actually came with it, they're Dell props, the Tri 40 45s, I should say. I'm so used to saying 50 45s, but what these are, they're not the most aggressive prop, and I'd say these are more of like a buttery sort of feel, and you do get that when you're flying around. It is a very smooth flight experience, but top-notch power is not what you're after, so it's not crazy in some straight flatline speeds. Now, speaking of the motors themselves, a very interesting choice. What we've got under here, these are Sunny Sky motors, and they're Vlyfly blended, but they're 1406, 1406, 3300 kV. There's counterclockwise and also clockwise motors, you know, so you've got the different threads, but that's a pretty light motor for a 4-inch, which is why I recommend don't go more aggressive than this right here. If you want some crazy, I guess, aggressive pitch props on there, I think you're going to burn your motors out or something like that. So you don't have crazy speed, but it is very, very light, and that means when you're sort of going to crash, it's going to hold up a little bit better in crashes. Now, speaking of those crashes, we have some very thick arms on the outside. So they're, I guess, across the top wires, they're 6mm, but they're actually 5mm thick. So I guess that's how thick the carbon is there. And I think that's going to hold up very well in crashes, especially considering you've got such a light motor on the outside. And then you'll notice there's no ESCs or anything like that, so it should be zipping through the air very, very fast. I'm going to get this bit out of the way, see if I can tie this down, because that's bugging me. But then in the middle, what we've got our 4-in-1 ESC, and this isn't like any ESC that I've seen before, you know. It's BOHEL ES, it's a 20 amp ESC, but this must be their own sort of brand, because it is not in that 4x4 sort of stack that we are so used to seeing. I guess the 20x20 stack that we're so used to seeing. This thing, it's totally different, and that was one of my first concerns. It feels like it's a little bit exposed, so when you're flying around, the props actually fly over the edge of the ESC. I don't know if you can see the clearance that we're getting there. The props actually fly over the outside. I had no issues whatsoever, but it is a very strange design to have that in there. Now on top of that, this is where we've got our F4 flight controller. Now it says it's an Omnibus, but it's Firefly branded. Very, very interesting. Looks like they've sort of come up with their own sort of stuff there. It's got the Betaflight OSD, it's an F4, that's pretty cool. And then on the top, we've got our VTX. Now I've got to say, we had some very, very clear pictures when we were flying around. So the vision combined with this, matched with the Foxeer camera on the front, is absolutely stellar. So you are going to get great FPV footage. The breakup was absolutely minimal. Now you do get this little antenna, and traditionally I would have said that was rubbish, but you know, I can't argue with the results, and you guys will see that in the DVR. This thing was very, very crisp and very, very clear. Now, of course, I got the bind and fly version. I'll put a link to all the versions down below as well, but this one came with the XM Plus receiver, which is fantastic. But one feature I really do like, put the antenna on, but yeah, one feature that I do like, if we plug this in, you can see, and something I found interesting too was the way they mounted their antennas. I thought that wasn't too much of a bad idea, because that's going to stop it falling into the props, and that's something I do worry about. Because it's in this sort of strange little loop, I thought, gee, it's a bit of a genius idea. I might use that in some of my future, you know, when I'm mounting some things in the future on UAV Futures. But let's plug this in and talk about one of the features that I like. Of course, it's got a buzzer. Hopefully that's not going to go off the whole time, but what you can see here, it tells you your battery voltage, which to be honest is pretty useless. I'm not too fussed about that unless you want to find out exactly what your voltage is while you're flying around and read it really quickly. That was the joke Trevor made, but you can see when you plug it in, it tells you exactly what channel that you're on. So it's very easy to cycle through the channels, all that sort of jazz. And it does go through them one at a time. So I know I fly around on D2, so let's get to that in a second. So if you miss it, it's going to be frustrating, but it is very cool how you can see exactly what channel that you're on. So you don't need to look at dip switches and, you know, the different flashing dials. It tells you all the information in one sort of screen. So I'm a big fan of that, and I think that's going to be useful for people in the field. They want to find out exactly what channel they're on, and that part can be a little bit of a mix-up when you're a new pilot. Now, speaking of the connectors, we've got our SMA antenna on the top, so you know that's where that connects in. It is sticking up out the top, and that means you can't really put a GoPro on here, and I don't think GoPros are really made for 4-inch quads anyway. They do sort of suffer with the weight, and they're much better suited for a 5-inch, so I'm not too concerned about that. But I reckon you could probably jerry something up, and you've got a little bit of a slight slope here if you did want to mount a GoPro, and you've got 2 slits through the frame that you could mount it using that. Alrighty, so with that said and done, let's talk about the design a little bit. And for me, this is where things sort of go a little bit crazy, because look, it did fly well and I enjoyed flying it around, but we have the way it's designed. I like how it's thin, I like how it's light, I like how it's beginner friendly, and I do worry though a little bit in the crashes. I think the frame's going to be okay, but the way this thing is designed with the standoffs that run up through the middle of the boards and it's all pressed together, I think time is going to tell. Look, in the crashes that we had with it, it held up pretty well, but I've never really seen this design used too much in the past, so time will tell how it's going to hold up in terms of its durability. The one thing it has going for it is it's not super heavy, so it should be able to bounce off things relatively easily, but your components right here, they are pretty exposed. Now, one good part though, one part that's not exposed, that's this camera on the front. So I'm a big fan of that. That's not going to be getting clipped or whatsoever. So it's cool that we've got some camera protection, but I would probably like some extra protection around these components. I like that it's for individual arms, so if individual arms ever get released, you know, it's very easy to change them out, all that sort of stuff. It makes it a little bit stronger as well if the carbon's cut correctly. And yeah, it's nice to see, I guess, a different drone approach than the traditional sort of style that we've seen. Whether it'll hold up in the long run, I guess that's something that I can't really answer in this bench breakdown. That's something we're going to have to find out over time. Now let's jump in, talk about the quality, and I've got to say some things. I'm going to talk about the flight experience. The flight experience, the quality of that was really, really nice. The camera was fantastic. They've done some great work, I guess, in terms of getting that video feed right. The power felt okay. It wasn't outstanding. In terms of the quality of the carbon, that's very nice. It's chamfered on the outside. It feels very, very stiff. All the bolts in my one anyway, they're all done up nice and tight, but I do worry about some of the solder joints. They look okay, but you know, there's a bit of this muck that's just put on here. That's the stop shorts and those sorts of things, secure them down. That looks like it's a bit haphazardly just been slopped on there. So that makes me wonder about the rest of the boards and how they've all gone together. So look, I'm probably going to give it like maybe a 7 out of 10 in terms of quality, the actual soldering, and probably like an 8 out of 10 in terms of the actual quality of the components and the rest of the craft. And the camera, well, that Foxeer one smashes it out of the park. 10 out of 10 for that one. So that brings us on to the pros and the cons. Well, I guess let's get the cons out of the way first. Number one for me, It doesn't have the most power to boot in a straight line, you know, flat out Insanity Racer. I think expert pilots, they're not going to be really getting the most out of this craft. This is aimed at beginners, someone who wants a very, very smooth, enjoyable flight experience, let alone, and not really that flat out crazy speed. Now, it does have lighter motors, and because of that and the less aggressive props, so that means that top speed's not there. But what you do get is a bit of a pro. It means it's a very smooth, very stable, very, I guess, enjoyable and easy to control drone experience. Now, in going with that experience, of course, that's with the FPV feed, crystal clear. I really like the FPV feed that I got. And then it comes to the other con. On the flip side of that, I am worried about the long-term, I guess, robustness of the components in here, and if they get nicked or anything like that, how's it going to hold up in the long run when you're crashing this drone? Because look, it is fairly, I guess it's fairly solid, but I'm not sure how it's going to hold up in crashes when the standoffs run all the way through these boards. So overall, look, I think it's a fun little drone. You guys definitely check it out in the part 2 that should be linked down below or up here or something like that. But it is a lot of fun. It takes on a cool, new, different, unique design. It's super lightweight as well. So, you know, if you're worried about FAA registration, you don't really have to do that. You could probably get away with a small battery and flying this thing around without needing to sort of be registered or anything like that. And look, I think VlyFly, I've got to give it to them. It's definitely a step in the right direction, because I have actually tested some of their previous drones, and I don't think they ever made it out to review, but I was doing some of the testing and things like that, and I wasn't really the biggest fan of them, but they've definitely stepped it up with here. They've been in the game actually for a little while, and I think this is sort of starting to head in the right direction. So it's starting to I guess I should say, it is a nice flight experience, which is the most important thing. Alrighty, so there it is. There's my bench breakdown, part 1 review of the VlyFly X150, and overall, look, I do like some things in there. The only real issue I have with it is how's it going to hold up in the long run. It's not meant to be a power horse or anything like that, or a powerhouse. I don't think it's going to have that super top speed and with the smaller motors, but what it does have, it's super light, it's good for that under the 250 gram weight limit, and it does have crystal clear video, which you'll see in the FPV feed when you're flying around as well. So look, overall, I think massive shout out to VlyFly, because they are stepping up their game. Some of the first ones that I've seen, they weren't so good, but this is definitely a step in the right direction. Anyway, what do you guys think? What do you like about it? Drop your comments down below so you can go in the draw to win one of these. Not this one, but you know, you'll be shipped one out to you guys. Subscribe for more FPV related content. Go check out part 2, because that should be live now as well. And as always, happy flying. Alrighty, so hopefully you guys enjoyed that video. Definitely subscribe if you're new to the channel and check out these videos. And I'm also going to leave a little link here to my Patreon page, because I've got some fantastic Patreon supporters and I like to give back to them as well. So if you want to join the UAV Futures family, there's things like bonus Velcro straps, little bundles of FPV goodies and things like that that also get sent out. Anyway, happy flying.